Hi everybody, I'm Christian and welcome to our new tutorial about how to make a roguelike in Pico-8. Off the bat, if you just want to cut to the chase, then you better skip this video and jump right to the next video of this playlist, because in this episode we're not going to do actually any coding, but we're going to discuss a little bit what this project is all about. So if you want to see me start coding, jump to the next video. For all of you other people, welcome. It's been a long time. So I decided, I've been thinking about what kind of tutorial to make, and I decided to make this tutorial next because there is a big game jam coming up. It's a 7-day roguelike challenge 2019. The 7-day roguelike challenge is something that comes up every year. It's like a big, very old school type of game jam where the challenge is to make a roguelike in 7 days. And so I thought I'm gonna prepare a video series for all of you guys to be able to join the 7-day roguelike challenge this year in 2019. And if you watch this later and you missed the 7-day roguelike challenge, there's always, the next year and stuff like that. Or you can just make a roguelike, it's fine. Also, I thought I'm gonna make a bit more of an advanced tutorial. The last tutorial that we made, that was the breakout tutorial. That was kind of like the basic, this is the first thing that you ever did, here's how variables work and stuff like that. This time around, I want to make something more sophisticated, something more complicated, to talk about some of the high-end challenges when making Pico-8 games. So, if this is the first game you ever made, maybe check out the breakout tutorial. Maybe make a practice game first before continuing here. I know a lot of people want to make roguelikes, but they are kind of quite challenging, and you might be able to keep up in the first episodes, but quite quickly you might be out of your depth, which is fine. You can always branch off and do something else. It's just there's going to be some serious stuff coming up. Now, what is a roguelike? Is maybe something that you might be asking yourself. And so that's one of the things that's kind of difficult to nail down, and the roguelike community is well known to be kind of dominated by discussions of what are and aren't roguelikes. And there's the Berlin definition or the interpretation, and there's all those rules and there are all those spin-offs that may or may not be roguelikes. But I want to maybe clarify what kind of game we are going to make. Actually, I already made the game, so this is going to be a bit different from the last tutorial. So you should be seeing this game playing right in the corner. Wait a minute, is this direction? That's the right direction. What I mean with a roguelike is kind of like a top-down, a round-based, kind of like an RPG kind of thing, with a procedurally generated dungeon. And when you cannot save, when you die, you restart, and so there's permadeath involved. And and there's some other rules for roguelikes. We're going to see, how strongly we're going to adhere to those rules or not. Now, is it a good idea to make a roguelike in Pico-8? Obviously, it's a very, very bad idea. It's very, very bad. That might be the obvious answer. So there's two good reasons why making roguelike in Pico-8 is a horribly bad idea. One of the reasons is that Pico-8 has a very low resolution, 128 times 128, and that's very little information that you can convey to the player. And roguelikes, while they usually often use those, especially traditional roguelikes, use these kind of very lo-fi ASCII kind of displays, they still communicate a lot of information. And that might be difficult to pull off in 128 times 128 pixels, so let's see about that. The second reason why making a roguelike in Pico-8 is horrible, or a bad idea at least, is because we have a very limited token count. We have 8,192 tokens, and that's all you get. And when you run out of tokens, you're done. And roguelikes traditionally are kind of these kinds of games where you pile on systems. You put more systems on top, keep on making more systems. It's kind of I think on Twitter recently there was this discussion where people called it the maximum viable product. So there's like the minimum viable product, where it's like you make, you know, the smallest game or the smallest program that you can reasonably ship and that has like some basic functionality. Roguelikes are the maximum viable product, where you just pile on features and it grows into, metastasizes into this huge thing, typically. So that's kind of like the roguelike when we talk of something about like NetHack, right? Something, a game that was developed over decades and like like a strata of features and gameplay mechanics have been, you know, layered on top of each other, and you can do anything in this game. And that's kind of like this dream that often roguelikes are about. So yeah, you cannot do that in Pico-8 because it's going to be over after 8,000. But I think there's like a, you know, galaxy brain level here where it might be actually a good idea to work with Pico-8 with roguelikes. So this limit, this, you know, 8,192 tokens, is actually something good, especially if we're making a roguelike for the 7-day roguelike challenge, because for the 7-day roguelike challenge you have to make a roguelike in 1 week. And if you only have 1 week, you cannot make this kind of like huge, expansive, gigantic roguelike game, but you might be tempted to. And if you give into the temptation, you won't be able to finish your game in seven days. So having like a second thing that forces you to keep your roguelike simple and down low might be very positive for the 7-day roguelike challenge. Let's see about that. I brought with you some things to look at, so we can, you know, we can discuss a little bit what we're going to do a little bit. Look at this. Oh, new technology. I love it. Okay, so this is the 7-day roguelike challenge 2019. It's going to be up on itch.io, and so it starts in 28 days, and you should slam this join jam button there, and you might be able to submit your game if you're done. Typically, they usually say that it's fine to develop like a framework for your roguelike before you start developing your actual roguelike in the 7 days. So it's fine for you to kind of like work on this tutorial to kind of like get your technology up and running. So later on, you know, when the 7 days start, you don't have to like, oh, I have to print things on a screen and I have to program like a pathfinding function or something like this. Like all of these frameworks is something that you can prepare in advance. However, tinkering with the gameplay mechanics, that's something that you leave for the 7-day roguelike challenge. So that was basically one of my goals here, to create something like a template, something like a vanilla template for a roguelike in Pico-8 that you can like tweak and change and, you know, turn inside out during the 7-day roguelike challenge. 28 days. Holy crap, not a lot of time. We have to be quick. Yeah, maybe some inspirations or some guiding principles that I really enjoy. So I'm really a big sucker for Caves of Cud. If you haven't played this game, it's really great roguelike, and it's, I think, an example of these kind of like big, expansive roguelikes with a lot of content and really beautiful. So Caves of Cud is this beautiful, it looks very retro, it looks like, you know, very old kind of game, but actually it's made in Unity. So, you know, it's like there's quite some technology behind it, and there's also a lot of story, lore, and a lot of really cool system in there. Now, I think Caves of Cud in some ways is the kind of game I want to be making, in sense of I really like the aesthetics that they go for, where they deliberately choose something that looks as if it was, you know, old, like made in 80s, 70s or something like this, because the tiles that, for example, they use, the tiles here, they kind of look as if they are like some crazy ASCII tiles, some kind of like crazy letters or foreign characters that are maybe modified to look as if they were, you know, like creatures and trees and stuff like that. But it is very much not the kind of roguelike that we can do in 7 days, because, you know, this has been in development since years now and it's still not finished. So we're not going to do something like this in 7 days, and we're certainly not going to do something in Pico-8. So here's some example of games that we could pull off in 7 days, and we could pull off in Pico-8. If you haven't heard about Michael Bro, you should learn about Michael Bro. Michael Bro is like this guy who makes those really nice, tight, very well designed kind of like odd looking, but you know, he has his style. These kind of like puzzle roguelike-ish kind of games. It's kind of almost difficult to recognize them as roguelikes because they kind of like on very small grids and are about, you know, moving like in a very puzzle-like fashion. You never actually explore a dungeon or anything, or rarely. You're kind of like moving like on this very tight grid and interacting with individual tiles on this grid and, you know, triggering different mechanics that are very interesting and very exciting. So I think this is something that is well suited to be implemented in Pico-8 and something that you can actually maybe pull off, or at least like a prototype you can pull off in 7-day roguelike challenge. One of his first games, or one of these games that he kind of like was his big breakthrough, it was called Hack 939, was actually made in the 7-day roguelike challenge. So again, these kinds of games that you can actually pull off in this short amount of time. Another good example also on iOS, another game that was created during the 7-day roguelike challenge is Hoplite. I really like Hoplite. It's kind of like this, you're one character, you have like 3 abilities or 4 abilities, and you're kind of like, you know, doing like tactical maneuvering, fighting one floor of enemies after another. Again, not really like a dungeon where you explore stuff, not even like an inventory system. Just like you with your, you know, fixed abilities trying to kind of like battle those enemies. Really good example of very few elements creating really interesting, compelling gameplay. Cool stuff. Should check it out. Now, there's actually a very specific game that I was really struck by. I was like, yes, this is exactly the kind of game I want to be making. So this is called Midnight Dungeon by a really cool pixel artist called, well, his nickname is Pixel Artem. This is called Midnight Dungeon, and it is a Bitsy game. And it uses like this really cool, very retro looking, like 3-color tile set. And it kind of looks like a roguelike, but it's not really like a roguelike because it's made in Bitsy, so it's kind of like more of an adventure game that looks as if it was like an old school RPG with like very limited graphic capability. Something maybe that was would be created on a ZX Spectrum that had like a very rough, very coarse color palette. I love it. But he really put a lot of really cool details into the tile set, and that's a kind of like a look that I wanted to copy, or I wanted to kind of like riff on. I actually reached out to him and asked him if he was okay, and he was so nice, and he was like, yeah, go for it. So yeah, we're going to be kind of like riffing a little bit on some of the details that he has here. Later on when we start developing, I'm going to point out some of the cool little details that I really like about this tile set and how this game works. There's, by the way, of course, our good friend Igor Dorichev made a Pico-8 adaptation of that already. So you might be thinking like, hey, so somebody already made this game, but no, he actually also made like an adventure style kind of game. So it's basically kind of same functionality as the Bitsy game, where it's more of an adventure thing. It's one adventure, not procedurally generated, and there is like no combat, no like procedural mechanics in here, just really like going through a sequence of events. Cool game, love it very much, and I like that the proof of concept that it can work in Pico-8, but we're gonna see if we can push it one step further. Okay, so I wrote down some notes. So again, this is not a tutorial for beginners, and if this is your first Pico-8 game, you probably should not be doing this. I mean, you can. I'm not gonna, you know, throw you out, but you've been warned. Something I want to do in this project is utilize the map system. That's something we absolutely avoided in our previous tutorial, haven't talked about it a lot. And actually, personally, I haven't been using the tile system too much, the map system. So I want to get into the map system in this project a little bit, learn something myself about how this works, and seeing like what are the advantages and disadvantages of it. Just to let you know, the map system is like this part here, where you can like take the tiles and start drawing things around. So you can create levels in Pico-8. Something I want to be using. Another thing I want to be, is going to be like a self-imposed restriction, is I'm going to be having one screen only roguelike type of experience. So if you ever seen a roguelike like Broke, for example, or like the original Rogue, actually, like all of these have like a map on the one screen and there is no scrolling whatsoever. So that's something I want to adhere to. That kind of like, you know, solves a lot of problems. You don't have to deal with like scrolling and stuff like that. But also, I think it's kind of like faithful to the original idea of the roguelike, something that's really like self-contained, you know, and very crisp. This, of course, imposes a lot of challenges because, as I already said, we don't really have a lot of screen real estate. So we have to make sure that the dungeons, that the levels that we create are going to work in this very, very low resolution. I want to have a procedural dungeon. That's something I want to be doing. I want to step like through the process of generating a map procedurally and kind of like trying some techniques of generating stuff procedurally. If you look at some of the other games that we saw, like from Michael Bro or from or the Hoplite game, these are games that don't really have like they have procedural generation, but not really like a dungeon with like rooms and corridors and stuff like that. They're not really like evoking too much of an actual place. They're more like levels, and you know, they have maybe some obstacles randomly strewn about, but not really trying to like sculpt some kind of look and feel. And if you looked at the game of the Midnight Dungeon game, that kind of had like a dungeon thing going on. And I want to be generating that kind of dungeon procedurally. Big challenge, and I think something that a lot of you out there might be interested in. I actually did like a survey online on Twitter and asked what kind of things people want to have. And that was like one of the things that people asked for. Another thing that people ask for is in an inventory system. Now, this is a bit of a challenge because that kind of like puts us into a territory where suddenly very complicated systems come in. But I think like walking through the steps of how to make a compact, you know, simple yet effective inventory, you know, window system where you can navigate through UI and manage items. That's something that might be a good skill to carry on to other projects as well. So yeah, we're gonna have inventory system, even though it might not be doing too much, but you know, we're gonna try to do our best. And that also taps into like the next step here is I want this game to be kind of like very vanilla and not really trying to anything radical, not really trying to paint outside of the lines. And the reason for this is this is supposed to be a project that you can then later hack apart and turn inside out, throw away parts of it and replace them with other stuff and try those really radical ideas. This is supposed to be like a really, you know, dungeon crawler, you know, hack and slay kind of game that you can just like bash around and then later change to make it more radical. So so we're going to be using a lot of tropes. We're going to rely on a lot of like RPG tropes, and we're going to duplicate them basically. Don't worry, it's me after all. I will, of course, I can't stop myself, and I usually like to still add some more of my own ideas to it. But yeah, we're going to talk about this later on. So yeah, again, it's going to be a bit of a vanilla game. And finally, we already talked about this. Again, we're going to go for this lo-fi kind of look, just grayscale colors, and then maybe one color to add like a bit of a pop. So there's going to be also a bit of a challenge how to make things clear, how to communicate things clearly with such a lo-fi look. This is it. If you have any more questions or requests for this tutorial, let me know. We're going to start this right away, and hopefully we're going to get done during February. If you watch this after February, then you know you have the entire tutorial in front of you, hopefully. There's one more thing. Down there are is the Discord channel that we are using. You can always join our Lazy Dev Discord channel where lots of people are hanging out and discussing. And something I will do before the tutorial is over, I will already post my prototype thing that I posted there. Because again, I coded the entire game already this time around, so there's not going to be any kind of any kind of dead ends and rewriting code because it didn't work. And we're gonna go straight for what the game's supposed to be. This has advantages and disadvantages. The advantages are you don't have to wait for the entire tutorial to be over. You can start playing this game and testing it and seeing how it's coded right away. If you go in the Discord, you will see a download link for the game and you can see the Pico-8 file and how it works. The disadvantage is that it's not going to be quite as a organic tutorial as last time around. I'm not going to be struggling with all of ideas, and I'm going to be sometimes like shortcutting things that if you were to develop this yourself you might be struggling with. So I'm not going to be trying gameplay ideas and then realizing that they don't work and reverting them. Something that's very natural when you develop your game yourself. But we're not going to go there to speed things up a little bit, just to for you to make sure that this is a bit of an unusual way of making a game, because I'm making the game basically a second time around. I will try not to copy too much from my old code and actually try to write the code again from scratch. So while I might have an idea of how the game is supposed to be structured and how the code is supposed to be programmed, it's still I'm still gonna have to deal with the problems and mistakes that I make as I go. All right, thank you for joining me this time around, and see you next episode where we're actually gonna start coding. Sorry for blabbering too much. Bye bye, guys.